cigar.
Yeah, a lot of people are trying to get to me to get to your cigar night, by the way, because it's sold out.
Sold out. You have to have some dirty pictures of me to get on the list now.
Oh, I'm going to bring out your high school yearbook, find some stuff.
Yeah, I could do it. Right. Yeah. My time when I used to hang out with Squee.
Yeah.
Might be a way to leverage me. All right. So we've talked a little bit about what some of the leading lights of the left had to say over the weekend. We haven't got to Elijah Cummings, though. Elijah Cummings is one who believes Trump should be impeached, but he's a little bit more measured than, say, your Adam Schiff's, which is a pretty low bar. He was on Face the Nation and basically saying, look, we got to persuade the public, and we're not there yet. But even if we don't persuade the public, we should pursue this anyway for historical reasons. Listen to Elijah Cummings' ability to, or attempt to, persuade the public by pretending he's not trying to persuade the public.
We all have to make decisions based upon the fact that it is our watch. And, history, I think, even if we did not win, possibly, if there were not impeachment, I think history would smile upon us for standing up for the Constitution. I hear a lot of people say that they're tired of hearing about the Mueller report. Well, we don't have time to get tired because the Russians aren't getting tired. They are attacking our electoral system every single day, if not every hour. And so we're going to have to stand up. And the other thing, Bob, is that now that we know all the information that we know, we can't just allow this to go on and on. If we do nothing here, what is going to happen is that the president is going to be emboldened. He's going to be emboldened because he said, well, I got away with that. And then the people who, his aiders and abettors, that is the Republicans in the Congress, they'll say, oh, he is pretty strong, and they'll continue to go along with him. We cannot afford that. Our democracy cannot afford that.
Mm-hmm. So it's the Red Dawn argument that Elijah Cummings is making. There are Russians everywhere. You see them, the paratroopers dotting the skyline, and we must fight. Is that the best Democrats have to offer? Are they really willing to risk an unpopular impeachment prosecution? For more on this topic and others, we're pleased to be joined by David Drucker, senior political correspondent for the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. Dave, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good to be here.
So what about that? A lot of two-stepping. Everybody's suggesting, Nadler, Maxine, Elijah, Schiff, suggesting that Trump is guilty of obstruction. The Mueller report makes it clear he should be impeached, and some are trying to pump the brakes a little bit and try to get a little bit more public support before they open a formal impeachment proceeding, before they pursue a formal impeachment prosecution. Is this just posturing, or do you think the Democrats hope something will break that Mueller was unable to identify that will actually provide them the ability politically to move forward?
Yeah, well, I think it's probably a little of both. I mean, the Democrats are trying to balance what's best for the party politically from a broad 2020 perspective with what their base wants, and that is to go after Trump as hard as they can, as much as they can, all the time. And they have to sort of balance those two things. And it's not unlike what Republicans in Congress were dealing with when President Barack Obama was in office. And so it's to be expected. I'd say that there's enough, even though Trump got the only result that mattered from the Mueller report conclusions, because the opposite obviously would have been devastating, there is enough information that is detailed in the Mueller report that gives Democrats plenty to look into, and also is enough information that they can't simply go to their activists and say, look, you read the report, there's just nothing in here. And that's just not the case, at least not from a political perspective.
Well, it gives Democrats something to look into. And Jerry Nadler or Adam Schiff is going to do a better job of looking into those things than the Mueller team did.
It's beside it, right.
Yeah.
You're making a good point, but it's beside the political point.
Yeah, right. Okay.
There is enough detail in there about what Trump did and how he responded to the Mueller report, which is separate from what he did or didn't do, that it's not really politically possible for the Democrats to go to their core progressive base and say, read the report, there's absolutely nothing there. There's enough there that it's enough for their base to chew on. And that's sort of the point I'm making here. And this whole thing reminds me a lot about Benghazi, when Republicans were looking into Hillary Clinton's role and Obama's role, in fact, in what they were doing before, during, and after the Benghazi terrorist attacks in September of 2012. There was never quite a smoking gun of that you could use to say that they were completely negligent or criminal or anything like that. But there was enough information in there that you couldn't ignore it, and that the Republican base wasn't going to allow them to ignore it. And the funny thing about this, it's not so funny necessarily, but the interesting thing is, it's the investigation into Benghazi that uncovered Hillary Clinton's homebrew server that nobody knew existed and nobody was looking for. So these sorts of things can take all sorts of strange turns.
Well, do you think if the Democrats try to impeach that there may be backlash at the polls in 2020?
Well, I think that the Democrats would be foolish to impeach unless the country had completely turned, because the Senate is controlled by the Republican Party. So what is the point from a political standpoint, unless you just want to make a point?
Yeah, you mean like Mitt Romney?
It would be potential. And I think it would be potentially risky, if it appeared as though they were only concerned about impeachment and not concerned about all of the different issues that people want addressed. That would certainly be a concern, and so they definitely, need to balance that. That's why I think their best strategic course of action, aside from everything else, is just to continue with very aggressive oversight, if you will, in the House, where they have control of the committees. And if they uncover stuff, then, they can say, look what we found. And if they don't, they can say we were just conducting oversight. Eventually, they're going to have a Democratic presidential nominee. That person's going to be the leader of the party, is going to set the agenda. And it'll be interesting to see how that individual at that time deals with this issue.
Well, so what's your temperature with respect to Republicans on the Hill? I mean, is there any grumbling, even privately, in addition to Mitt Romney's grumbling publicly?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we'll find out more because they're on a 2-week recess, which they do every time this year. And a lot of them are traveling overseas as a part of the work they do in Congress. But I suspect that, having covered them now the past few years in the Trump era, that many of them feel the way Mitt Romney does, only he went public with it, and a lot of them will just keep quiet about it.
What's Romney's play there by making a public statement?
Well, I think it's really simple, and watching Romney over the past couple of years covering his Senate race such that it was, Romney is just in a position where he can say whatever he wants when he wants, because Republicans in Utah are not going to be upset with him when he criticizes Trump. Mm-hmm. So he's in this unique position. Not only is he a national figure, not only is he 72 years old, and is he going to have the Senate seat as long as he wants it, there are a lot of Republicans, and I mean a lot, not all, but a lot of Republicans in Utah that don't like the president's behavior, don't like the way he conducts himself, never liked him all that much to begin with. So he doesn't run a political risk of getting slapped down at home when he chooses to publicly criticize the president.
I wanted to go over to the other side of the aisle. Atlantic reporting Joe Biden is running for president. He's going to make his
Wednesday, right?
Yeah, I mean, right. That's coming up. People, according to people familiar with the discussions, and this against the backdrop of this rather interesting op-ed in the New York Times. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but it's interesting if this is going to be a significant part of the primary conversation on their side. Should a white man be the face of the Democratic Party in 2020? Is a white man the best face for an increasingly diverse Democrat Party in 2020? What's the bigger gamble, to nominate a white man and risk disappointing some of the party's base, or nominate a minority or a woman who might struggle to carry predominantly white swing states in the Midwest that Trump won? But these authors, one national political reporter for the New York Times, Stead Hendon, say older white men are out of step with the ascendant forces in the party today. It's sort of remarkable because, I mean, is Joe Biden Bernie Sanders? Is Bernie Sanders Pete Buttigieg? But it seems like identity politics may fell a Biden, even a Sanders, and even a Buttigieg.
It might. I mean, this is going to be very interesting to watch. Some of the most compelling interesting candidates in this race so far are white men. Bernie Sanders, very compelling. I mean, he's a socialist. He's he's rather left of center, but he is compelling. It's one of the reasons why he's leading the race. Joe Biden is a compelling figure for so many reasons, and he has the imprimatur of being President Obama's vice president, and they work closely together. Buttigieg is one of the most compelling figures in the race. He's just interesting. He's different, and he's a good communicator, and that kind of thing inspires voters. There are other candidates in the race that are not white men that have compelling stories and are compelling figures, but so far they're not necessarily running the most compelling of campaigns overall. They're running compelling campaigns in particular ways. I mean, Elizabeth Warren is probably the most issue heavy. She's coming out with her own ideas every 5 minutes, which actually is a credit to her because most of these candidates are followers, and they're all following Bernie Sanders. Elizabeth Warren is actually the exception to that, and that is compelling. But so far, these figures that we've been talking about that are up leading the polls or near the top or rising, they're doing so because voters are responding to them. And I think what Democrats have to balance is, yes, they have an activist base, like every party does, that's looking for a certain kind of candidate. And yet, when you look at what's going to be a very high turnout primary, the sort of breadth of the primary electorate on the Democratic side is not going to be as liberal as the base. The same way, when you have a heavy turnout Republican primary, not everybody is as conservative as the activist Republican base. So, they're going to have to figure this out if they can figure it out.
He is David Drucker, senior political correspondent for the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. David, thanks always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime, guys. Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.